The judge leaned forward in her chair, and my own mother's face went from triumphant to confused to absolutely terrified in the span of about 5 seconds. Because what she didn't know, what her attorney didn't know, what nobody in that courtroom knew except the judge herself, was that I had been sitting across from that very same judge in 17 different cases over the past 4 years, and I had never, not once, been on the losing side. My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm 31 years old, and this is the story of how my mother tried to destroy me in court, and how everything she thought she knew about me turned out to be a lie she had told herself for so long that she actually believed it. I need you to understand something before we go any further, before I tell you about that day in the Los Angeles County Superior Court, before I explain how a woman who gave birth to me could stand up in front of a judge and call me incompetent, unstable, mentally unfit to manage my own life. I need you to understand that my mother, Victoria Chen, is not evil. She's not a monster. She's something much more dangerous than that. She's a woman who has convinced herself that everything she does is for the right reasons. And that makes her capable of absolutely anything. The courtroom was packed that morning. October 12th, a Thursday, one of those rare cool days in Los Angeles where the air doesn't feel like it's trying to suffocate you. I remember because I stood outside the courthouse for 20 minutes before going in, just breathing, just trying to steady myself for what was about to happen. I wore a gray suit, simple, professional, the kind of thing that wouldn't draw attention, because the last thing I wanted was to look like I was trying too hard. My mother, on the other hand, she wore a cream-colored designer dress, Chanel, I think, with pearls that had belonged to my grandmother, pearls she had no right to wear, but we'll get to that part later. My attorney, Marcus Liu, met me at the security checkpoint. He was 47 years old, divorced, with 2 daughters he saw every other weekend. I knew this because I know everything about the people I work with. It's part of my job, part of who I am. Marcus shook my hand and told me not to worry. Told me we had this. Told me the evidence was on our side. But his eyes said something different. His eyes said he was nervous because going up against a mother in court, even a mother like mine, is never easy. Juries sympathize with mothers. Judges sympathize with mothers. Society has decided that mothers are inherently good and daughters who fight them are inherently ungrateful. But here's what society doesn't know about Victoria Chen. Here's what nobody knew except me. Let me go back. Let me tell you how I ended up in that courtroom in the first place. Because this story doesn't start with a lawsuit. It starts 28 years earlier in a hospital in San Francisco when Victoria Chen gave birth to a daughter she never wanted. I know she never wanted me because she told me, not in a moment of anger, not during a fight, but calmly, matter-of-factly. When I was 14 years old and asked her why she always seemed disappointed in me, she said she had planned to have an abortion, that my father had talked her out of it, that she had spent my entire childhood wondering what her life would have been like if she had just gone through with it. And then she went back to reading her magazine like she had just commented on the weather. My father, David Chen, was a professor of mathematics at Berkeley. He was kind. He was gentle. He loved puzzles and classical music and terrible puns that made my mother roll her eyes. He died when I was 16, sudden heart attack, no warning, just there one day and gone the next. And when he died, whatever thin thread had been holding my mother's resentment in check just snapped. She didn't hit me. She didn't yell. She did something worse. She erased me. She stopped seeing me, stopped acknowledging me except when absolutely necessary. I became a ghost in my own house. And when I turned 18 and left for college, she sold the house, our house, the house where I grew up, the house where my father had lived. She sold it and moved to Los Angeles and never told me her new address. I didn't speak to my mother for 7 years after that. 7 years of building a life she knew nothing about. 7 years of becoming someone she would never recognize. I went to UCLA, got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, then my master's in forensic psychology. I graduated top of my class. I had job offers from 3 different federal agencies. I chose the FBI, specifically the Behavioral Analysis Unit. And I spent the next 4 years hunting the kind of people who hurt children, who exploit the vulnerable, who think they're smarter than everyone else. I was good at it. I was really good at it, because I understood how predators think. I understood how they justify their actions, how they tell themselves they're the victim, even while they're destroying someone's life. But my mother didn't know any of this. She didn't know what I did for a living, didn't know where I lived, didn't know that I had testified as an expert witness in 17 cases, that I had helped put away 32 people who had committed crimes against children, that federal prosecutors called me when they needed someone who could explain criminal psychology to a jury in a way that made sense. She knew none of this because she had never asked, had never cared, had never once in 13 years picked up the phone to see if I was alive. And that's what made what happened next so much worse. My grandmother, my father's mother, Eleanor Chen, died 4 months ago. She was 86 years old. She had been living in a care facility in San Diego for the past 3 years. Early stage Alzheimer's, nothing severe. She knew who I was. She remembered stories from her childhood. She just needed help with daily tasks, medication management, that kind of thing. I visited her every 2 weeks. I called her every Sunday. I was the one who sat with her when she got scared at night. When the disease made her forget where she was, I was the one who held her hand when she died, peaceful in her sleep, just the way she had wanted. She left me everything in her will, not because there was a fortune to inherit. She had been a librarian for 40 years. She lived modestly. She saved carefully, but there was enough. A house in San Diego worth about $400,000, a savings account with $98,000, some bonds, some stock, enough to change my life if I was smart about it, enough to pay off my student loans, put a down payment on a place of my own, maybe take a sabbatical and finish the book I had been working on about criminal profiling techniques. 3 weeks after the funeral, I got a letter from an attorney I had never heard of, a man named Gerald Whitmore, representing Victoria Chen, my mother. The letter informed me that my mother was contesting the will. She was claiming that Eleanor Chen had been mentally incompetent when she wrote it, that I had manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman, that I had isolated my grandmother from her family, specifically from Victoria, her loving daughter-in-law who had tried repeatedly to maintain a relationship but had been blocked by me. I actually laughed when I read it. It was so absurd, so completely detached from reality that I couldn't process it as a real thing. My mother hadn't seen Eleanor in over a decade, hadn't called her, hadn't sent her a birthday card, and now she was claiming she had tried to maintain a relationship. But then I stopped laughing because the letter also included a petition. My mother wasn't just contesting the will. She was petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent, to have a conservator appointed to manage my affairs, to have me, an FBI agent with a master's degree in forensic psychology, declared unfit to make my own decisions. And the proposed conservator was, of course, Victoria Chen herself. I called Marcus Liu that afternoon. He was a friend of a friend, someone I had worked with on a case 2 years earlier involving financial exploitation of the elderly. He knew what I did for a living, knew my credentials, knew that this petition was insane, but he also warned me. He said that once something like this is filed, it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is, the process starts. You have to respond. You have to appear in court. You have to defend yourself. And while you're doing that, while you're proving you're not crazy, your reputation takes hits, people start asking questions, wondering if maybe there's something to it, wondering why someone's own mother would do this if there wasn't at least a grain of truth. The FBI put me on administrative leave, not because they believed the allegations, but because they couldn't have an agent whose mental competency was being questioned in court. It was a liability issue, an insurance issue, a political issue. My supervisor, a decent woman named Agent Sarah Rodriguez, who had been my mentor since I joined the unit, called me into her office and told me she believed me, told me she knew this was garbage, but that her hands were tied. I wasn't fired. I wasn't even suspended technically, but I couldn't work cases, couldn't testify, couldn't do the job I had spent 7 years building my career around. And that's when I realized what my mother had actually done. She hadn't just attacked my inheritance. She had attacked my identity, my credibility, everything I had built without her. I started digging, because that's what I do. That's what I'm trained to do. When someone commits a crime, they leave evidence, they leave patterns, they leave digital footprints and paper trails and behavioral signatures. And Victoria Chen was no different. I pulled her financial records, public records, credit reports, property records, bankruptcy filings, court records. I built a profile the same way I would build a profile on any subject. And what I found was disturbing. My mother was broke, not just broke, but drowning. She owed $347,000 to various creditors, credit cards, personal loans, a second mortgage on a condo she owned in Marina del Rey, medical bills from procedures I didn't even know about. She had declared bankruptcy once in 2019, then again in 2022. She was being sued by a former business partner for fraud. She had liens on her property. Her car had been repossessed twice. She was, for lack of a better word, desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. But it was worse than just debt. I found restraining orders, 2 of them, filed by former friends who claimed my mother had borrowed money and then become hostile when asked to pay it back. I found small claims court judgments against her, 7 of them over the past 5 years, amounts ranging from $2,000 to $15,000. I found complaints filed with the California Medical Board about a plastic surgery practice she had tried to open without proper licensing. The practice had been shut down. She had been fined, and based on the timeline, that was probably when the debt spiral had really started. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. In 2021, 3 years ago, my mother had been investigated for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The victim was an 82-year-old woman named Martha Levinson, a wealthy widow who had befriended Victoria at a charity luncheon. Over the course of 6 months, Victoria had borrowed increasing amounts of money from Martha. Small amounts at first, 1,000 here, 2,000 there, always with a story, always with a promise to pay it back. By the end, she had taken $94,000. Martha's family had noticed the withdrawals. They had confronted Victoria. They had filed a police report, but Martha had refused to press charges. She said Victoria was her friend. She said she had given the money willingly. The investigation was dropped. But the pattern was there, clear as day. My mother was a predator. She targeted vulnerable people. She manipulated them. She took their money. And when my grandmother died, when she saw that $98,000 savings account, she had seen another mark. I didn't sleep for 3 days after I found all of this. I sat in my apartment with my laptop and files spread across every surface. And I did what I had been trained to do. I built a case, I documented everything. I created timelines and cross-referenced documents and verified every single fact 3 times. Because I knew that when I walked into that courtroom, I would only get one chance to show the judge who my mother really was. Marcus wanted to settle. He thought we should present the evidence to Gerald Whitmore and force them to drop the petition. But I said, no, I wanted my mother to commit. I wanted her to go all in on her lies. I wanted her to stand up in that courtroom and tell a judge under oath that I was mentally incompetent. Because once she did that, once she made those accusations in a legal proceeding, I could destroy her, not just win the case, but destroy the persona she had built, the victim story she told herself, the delusion that she was a good person who had just had bad luck. The deposition happened 2 weeks before the trial. Gerald Whitmore was in his 60s, one of those attorneys who had probably been successful once, but was now just taking whatever cases paid the bills. He asked me about my education. I told him I had a bachelor's and a master's degree. He asked me about my employment. I told him I work for the federal government. He asked me about my relationship with my grandmother. I told him we had been close. He never asked what I did for the federal government, never asked which department, never asked what my job title was. He assumed I was a clerk, a secretary, someone administrative, someone harmless. My mother was present via video link. I watched her face during the deposition. She looked confident, almost smug. She thought she had already won, thought I was going to fall apart under questioning, thought I was still the scared teenager who had asked her why she didn't love me. She had no idea who I had become, and I wasn't about to tell her. Victoria's deposition was revealing. She claimed that Eleanor had been showing signs of dementia for years, that I had isolated Eleanor from the family, that I had convinced Eleanor to leave everything to me. When Marcus asked her when she had last spoken to Eleanor, she hesitated, then said it had been a few years, but only because I had prevented contact. Marcus asked if she had any evidence of this, any emails, any blocked calls, any proof that I had interfered. She said she didn't need proof. She knew her daughter, knew what I was capable of. It was almost funny, watching her try to maintain this fiction, watching her believe her own lies. The trial was set for October 12th, Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. I had never appeared in Judge Morrison's court before, but I had researched her. Stanford Law, 23 years on the bench, known for being thorough, impatient with poorly prepared attorneys, and deeply skeptical of family drama. She had a reputation for seeing through manipulation, which was either going to help me or hurt me, depending on how the day went. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:15. Marcus was already there, going over our evidence one more time. We had everything, the financial records showing Victoria's debts, the restraining orders, the small claims judgments, the investigation into the Martha Levinson case. We had Eleanor's medical records showing she had been mentally competent until the very end. We had visitor logs from the care facility showing I had visited her 62 times in the past year and Victoria had visited exactly 0 times. We had testimony lined up from Eleanor's doctor, from the facility administrator, from 3 of Eleanor's friends who would testify that she had always intended to leave everything to me. We had everything we needed, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. Victoria arrived at 8:50. 20 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to start. She wore that cream-colored Chanel dress and Eleanor's pearls, and when she saw me sitting at the respondent's table, she smiled. Actually smiled like this was all some kind of game she was sure she would win. Gerald Whitmore looked less confident. He kept checking his phone, shuffling papers, whispering urgently to Victoria. I wondered if he was starting to realize he hadn't done his homework. All rise. The bailiff announced. Judge Morrison entered and took her seat. She was in her early 60s, short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked at the case file in front of her, then looked at the petitioner's table, then looked at me, and I saw it, the same look I had seen in 17 other courtrooms, recognition, not of me specifically, but of something familiar, something that didn't quite fit with the narrative she had been presented. Gerald Whitmore stood and began his opening statement. He spoke for about 8 minutes, painting a picture of a concerned mother who had been estranged from her daughter due to family conflict, who had watched from a distance as her daughter manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman, who was now seeking justice not for herself, but for the memory of Eleanor Chen. He talked about my history of mental health issues. He referenced counseling I had received after my father's death when I was a teenager. He suggested that this was evidence of a lifelong pattern of instability. He never once mentioned what I did for a living, never asked, never cared. He just assumed. When he finished, Judge Morrison asked if the petitioner wished to make a statement. Victoria stood. She smoothed her dress. She looked directly at the judge and began to speak. She talked about how worried she was about me, how she had tried for years to maintain a relationship, but I had pushed her away, how she had watched helplessly as I isolated Eleanor, how she believed that I was not mentally fit to manage the inheritance. And then, and this is the part I had been waiting for, she raised her voice. She pointed at me and she said, "Your Honor, my daughter is mentally unstable. She has been her whole life. She manipulated my mother-in-law. She isolated a vulnerable woman. She is not fit to manage her own affairs, let alone control a significant estate. I am asking this court to protect her from herself, to appoint me as conservator so I can get her the help she needs." I didn't react. I kept my hands folded on the table. I kept my expression neutral. I had been in rooms with serial killers who tried to intimidate me, with child predators who tried to charm me, with psychopaths who thought they were smarter than me. My mother's performance was amateur hour. Judge Morrison watched the outburst without changing her expression. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She removed her glasses. She looked at Gerald Whitmore, and she asked, "Counselor, do you know who this woman is? The woman your client just called mentally unstable and unfit." Gerald looked confused. He glanced at his notes. She's an employee of the federal government, Your Honor, an administrator of some kind. Judge Morrison looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to Marcus. "Mr. Liu, I assume you'd like to respond to these allegations." Marcus stood. He didn't give a speech. He simply said, "Your Honor, I believe the evidence will show that Ms. Chen is not only mentally competent, but is in fact one of the foremost experts in the country on the very type of behavior her mother is accusing her of. We have substantial documentation that will reframe the court's understanding of this case." Judge Morrison nodded. "Proceed." Marcus opened his briefcase. He handed copies of our evidence package to the clerk, who distributed them to Gerald and the judge. He started with my credentials, my education, my employment history, my list of publications, my expert witness testimony record, 17 cases. 17 times I had sat in courtrooms, not unlike this one, and explained to judges and juries how predators manipulate vulnerable people, how they justify their actions, how they target victims. 17 times, and Judge Morrison had presided over 4 of them. I watched Gerald's face as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks as he realized what he had walked into, watched Victoria's expression change from confident to confused to something that might have been fear. She still didn't fully understand, still didn't grasp what was happening, but she knew something had gone very wrong. Marcus presented the financial evidence next, Victoria's debts, her bankruptcies, her history of borrowing money and not paying it back, the restraining orders, the investigation into the Martha Levinson case. He walked through it methodically, calmly, like he was presenting evidence in a criminal trial, because that's exactly what this was. My mother had committed a crime, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, attempted fraud, and we were about to prove it. Then Marcus presented Eleanor's medical records, comprehensive documentation from her doctor, from her care facility, showing that she had been mentally competent until the very end, that she had understood exactly what she was doing when she wrote her will, that she had specifically and repeatedly stated her intention to leave everything to me. We had it in writing. We had it witnessed. We had it notarized. There was no ambiguity, no question. Eleanor Chen had known exactly what she wanted and had made sure it would happen. And then came the visitor logs, 62 visits from me in the past year, 0 from Victoria. Marcus presented photographs of me with Eleanor, dozens of them, spanning years, birthday celebrations, holidays, random Tuesdays when I drove down to San Diego just to have lunch with her. There were no photographs of Victoria because Victoria had never been there, hadn't called, hadn't written, hadn't acknowledged Eleanor's existence except when she smelled money. The courtroom was silent when Marcus sat down. You could hear the air conditioning, could hear someone shifting in their seat in the back row, could hear Victoria's breathing getting faster, sharper, like she was starting to panic. Judge Morrison looked at Gerald Whitmore. "Counselor, do you have anything to say in response to this evidence?" Gerald stood. He cleared his throat. He looked at his notes, then at Victoria, then back at the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess to confer with my client." "Do you need?" Judge Morrison said flatly. "You've had weeks to prepare for this hearing, Mr. Whitmore. You chose to bring a petition questioning the mental competency of an FBI agent without doing even basic research into her background. You chose to accuse her of elder abuse when your own client has a documented history of exactly that behavior. So no, I will not grant you a recess. I want to hear what you have to say right now." Gerald sat back down. He whispered something to Victoria. She shook her head violently, whispered something back. They argued in urgent, hushed tones while the entire courtroom watched, and then Gerald stood again. "Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw her petition." Judge Morrison's expression hardened. I'm sure she does, but I'm not prepared to simply dismiss this matter, Mr. Whitmore. Your client has made serious allegations under oath. She has wasted this court's time. She has attempted to manipulate the legal system to gain access to money that does not belong to her, and based on the evidence presented here, this is not the first time she has engaged in this type of behavior. I am referring this case to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for review of possible criminal charges. I am also forwarding this evidence to the California Attorney General's Office for investigation into the Martha Levinson matter, which appears to have been improperly closed. Victoria stood up. Your Honor, I can explain. My daughter, she's always been difficult. She's always. Sit down, Miss Chen, Judge Morrison said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You have lied to this court. You have made false accusations against your daughter. You have attempted to exploit your former mother-in-law's death for financial gain, and you have wasted everyone's time with a petition so frivolous that I am considering sanctions against your attorney for even filing it. The petition is denied with prejudice. Ms. Rebecca Chen is hereby confirmed as the sole beneficiary of Eleanor Chen's estate. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down, the sound echoed through the courtroom, and it was over. Just like that, no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, just evidence presented clearly and a judgment delivered firmly. That's how justice actually works. Not with explosions, but with documentation, with preparation, with truth. I stood up, my legs felt shaky. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder, said something about how we had won, how it was over, but I wasn't listening. I was watching my mother, watching her sit at that table with her head in her hands, watching her realize that she had destroyed herself, that her lies had caught up with her, that the daughter she had abandoned, the daughter she had erased, the daughter she thought was weak, had just taken everything from her. Victoria looked up at me then. Our eyes met for the first time in 13 years, really met, without lawyers or courts or documents between us. And I saw something in her face that I had never seen before. She looked small, diminished, like a balloon that someone had let the air out of. And I felt nothing, not triumph, not satisfaction, not even pity, just nothing. She was a stranger, a person who happened to share some DNA with me, and that was all she would ever be. I walked out of that courtroom, Marcus beside me, talking about next steps, about making sure the DA followed up, about protecting my inheritance from any future challenges. But I barely heard him. I was thinking about Eleanor, about how she used to tell me that truth has a weight to it, that lies float away eventually, but truth sinks in and stays. She was right. She was always right. The DA's office moved faster than I expected. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Park called me 3 days after the hearing. She had reviewed the evidence. She had pulled Victoria's financial records. She had contacted Martha Levinson's family. She was building a case for attempted fraud and perjury related to the court hearing. She asked if I would be willing to testify. I said yes without hesitation. The criminal trial happened 4 months later. Victoria pled guilty to attempted fraud. She took a plea deal, 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation, mandatory restitution to Eleanor's estate for legal fees. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't enough. But it was something. It was accountability. It was consequence. It was the truth finally catching up. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. I didn't need to see her face when the judge handed down the sentence. I had already won, not in court, but in every way that mattered. I had survived her. I had built a life she knew nothing about. I had become someone she would never understand, and that was victory enough. Eleanor's estate was finally settled in March. I kept the house in San Diego. I couldn't sell it. Not yet, maybe never. It still smells like her. Like lavender and old books and the specific kind of peace that only exists in spaces where people have been genuinely loved. I go there sometimes when work gets too heavy, when I've spent too many days inside the minds of monsters. I sit on the porch and drink coffee the way she used to, 2 sugars and a splash of cream. And I remember that not everyone is broken, that some people are genuinely good, that love doesn't have to hurt. The FBI reinstated me the week after the court hearing. Agent Rodriguez called me personally to tell me the administrative leave was over, that I was cleared to return to full duty, that there were 3 cases waiting for my analysis. I went back to work, and I was better at my job than I had been before, because now I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. I understood that predators come in all forms, that they're not always strangers in dark alleys. Sometimes they're mothers who convince themselves that their children owe them something. Sometimes they're family members who see love as a transaction. Sometimes they're people who have told themselves lies for so long that the lies become their reality. I got a letter from Victoria about 6 months after her sentencing. It arrived at my apartment. Forwarded from an old address she must have found somehow. I held it in my hands for a long time. This thin white envelope with her handwriting on the front. Handwriting I remembered from birthday cards she used to sign without writing any actual message, just her name, Victoria, like that was supposed to mean something. I almost opened it, almost let myself hope that maybe this time there would be an apology, a real one, an acknowledgement of what she had done, of what she had tried to do. But then I thought about Eleanor, about how she used to say that some people will never see you clearly because seeing you would require them to see themselves. And they're not capable of that, so I didn't open the letter. I put it in the shredder in my office, watched it turn into thin strips of paper, and then I went back to work. Marcus became a friend after everything was over, not a close friend, but someone I trust, someone who saw me at my most vulnerable and didn't flinch. We have coffee sometimes, talk about cases, about the legal system, about how broken it is, and how we keep showing up anyway because what else is there? He told me once that the case with my mother changed how he practices law, that he does deeper research now, that he doesn't make assumptions anymore, that he learned from my mother's attorney's mistakes. I told him that's the only good thing that came out of the whole mess, that maybe Gerald Whitmore's humiliation would save someone else from making the same stupid mistakes. I think about my mother sometimes, not often, but sometimes. I wonder if she understands what she did, if she's capable of understanding, if somewhere in whatever facility she's in now, serving out her sentence, she ever has a moment of clarity where she sees herself the way the rest of the world sees her. I doubt it. People like Victoria, people who have spent their whole lives constructing elaborate justifications for their behavior, they don't suddenly become self-aware. They don't suddenly develop empathy. They just persist. They serve their time and they get out and they find new victims because that's what they do. That's who they are. But here's the thing I've learned. The thing that keeps me going when work gets dark and the cases pile up and I start to wonder if there's any point to any of this. Justice isn't about changing bad people. It's not about making them see the error of their ways. It's about protecting good people. It's about making sure that when someone tries to hurt you, when someone tries to take what's yours, when someone tries to destroy you with lies and manipulation, there are systems in place to stop them. Imperfect systems, yes. Broken systems sometimes, but systems nonetheless. My mother thought she could manipulate those systems, thought she could use them as a weapon against me, thought that because I was quiet and didn't fight back immediately, I must be weak. She forgot that strength isn't about making noise. It's about knowing when to stay silent and when to strike. It's about gathering evidence and building cases and waiting for exactly the right moment to show the world who you really are. I'm getting married next month. His name is David. Yes, same name as my father. No, it's not weird. He's a civil rights attorney. We met at a conference 3 years ago. He made a joke about how federal agents and defense attorneys aren't supposed to get along, and I told him that was a myth perpetuated by TV shows. We've been together ever since. He knows about my mother, knows the whole story. He was there in the back of that courtroom the day everything happened. He says he knew I would win, says he could see it in the way I held myself, in the way I didn't react to Victoria's theatrics. He says I have this quality, this stillness that makes people underestimate me, and that's when they lose. Eleanor would have liked David. She would have approved of him in that quiet way she had. She would have made him tea, and asked him about his family and his work. And she would have watched the way he looks at me, the way he listens when I talk about my cases, the way he understands that I need silence sometimes, that I need space to process the darkness I deal with every day. She would have seen that he's good for me, that he's steady and kind and real, and she would have been happy. I miss her. I miss her every single day. I miss her voice and her laugh, and the way she used to hum while she cooked. I miss calling her on Sundays and telling her about my week. I miss the way she never judged me, never made me feel like I needed to be anything other than exactly who I was. She was the only person in my life who loved me unconditionally, without agenda, without expectation, just loved me. And losing her hurt in ways I'm still processing, in ways I probably always will be. But she gave me something before she died, something more valuable than the house or the money or any physical thing. She gave me proof. Proof that I was worth loving, proof that I deserved good things, proof that the story my mother had told about me, the story of a difficult child, a troubled teenager, a mentally unstable adult, that story was a lie. And lies don't hold up under scrutiny, not when you have documentation, not when you have witnesses, not when you have a lifetime of evidence that shows who you really are. I testified in my 43rd case last week. It was a complex fraud scheme involving a nursing home administrator who had been stealing from elderly residents for 3 years. The defense attorney tried to discredit me, tried to suggest I had a bias against family members, tried to bring up my own family situation. The prosecutor objected, the judge sustained. But I answered anyway. I looked at the jury and I said that yes, I have personal experience with elder abuse. And yes, that experience makes me better at my job, not worse, because I understand the psychology. I understand the manipulation. I understand how predators think. And the jury came back with a guilty verdict in less than 2 hours. Agent Rodriguez pulled me aside after the trial. She said she was proud of me, said I had come back from the situation with my mother stronger than before, said she was recommending me for a promotion, supervisory special agent. It would mean leading a team, training new agents, shaping the next generation of investigators. I said I'd think about it, but I already knew my answer. Yes. Yes to the promotion. Yes to the responsibility. Yes to using everything I've learned, everything I've survived, to help other people survive too. Some people ask me if I regret how things went with my mother, if I wish we could have worked it out some other way, if I feel guilty about her going to prison. And the answer is no. I don't regret anything. I don't wish for a different outcome. I don't feel guilty because what happened in that courtroom wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about truth. It was about making sure that someone who had spent decades manipulating people, hurting people, stealing from vulnerable people, finally faced consequences. It was about justice. And justice doesn't require forgiveness. I've started writing again. The book I put aside when everything happened with Victoria, it's about criminal profiling, about how to identify patterns of behavior, about how predators operate, but it's also about something else now. It's about how victims become survivors, about how survival sometimes means walking away from the people who hurt you, about how family is supposed to be a source of love and support. But sometimes it's just a source of pain, and recognizing that doesn't make you ungrateful or broken. It makes you honest. David read the first 3 chapters last week. He said it was powerful, said it was important, said people needed to hear these stories. I hope he's right. I hope that somewhere out there, someone reads about what happened to me and recognizes their own situation, recognizes the manipulation, the gaslighting, the financial exploitation, and finds the courage to fight back, to gather evidence, to stand up in court and tell the truth, no matter how scared they are. Because here's what I know now. Here's what that day in court taught me. Monsters don't always look like monsters. They don't always have fangs and claws. Sometimes they look like your mother. Sometimes they wear Chanel and pearls and smile while they try to destroy you. And the only way to fight them is with truth, with evidence, with the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone, not even family, tell you otherwise. I went back to Eleanor's grave last weekend. I brought flowers, daisies, because those were her favorite. I sat on the grass next to her headstone, and I told her everything. Told her about the trial, about Victoria's sentence, about David and the wedding, about the promotion, about the book. I told her that I was okay, that I was more than okay, that I was happy, genuinely happy for the first time in as long as I could remember. And I thanked her for loving me, for saving me, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. The wind picked up while I was sitting there, rustling through the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine from somewhere nearby. And for just a moment, just one brief perfect moment, I could have sworn I heard her voice, heard her say what she always used to say when I was struggling, when I was scared, when I didn't think I was strong enough. She used to say that truth is patient, that it waits for the right moment, that it doesn't need to shout because eventually, inevitably, it speaks for itself. She was right about that. She was right about everything. And in that courtroom, when Judge Morrison looked at my mother and saw exactly what she was, when the lies fell apart and the truth stood firm, when justice happened not because of dramatics or emotions, but because of evidence and preparation and quiet, unwavering strength, Eleanor's voice was there, reminding me that I had always been enough, that I had always been exactly who I needed to be. My mother tried to destroy me. She tried to use the legal system as a weapon. She tried to paint me as unstable, incompetent, unfit. She tried to take everything Eleanor had left me, not because she loved me, not because she cared about me, but because she saw an opportunity and thought I was too weak to stop her. She thought wrong. She underestimated the girl she had abandoned, the daughter she had erased, the woman I had become without her, and that mistake cost her everything. I'm not the same person I was before that trial. I'm harder in some ways, softer in others. I trust my instincts more. I second-guess myself less. I know what I'm capable of now. Know that I can face the worst parts of my past and come out stronger. Know that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is gather your evidence, prepare your case, and let the truth speak for itself. Judge Morrison pulled me aside after the hearing, after the courtroom had emptied and the lawyers had packed up their briefcases. She said she remembered me from previous cases, said she had always been impressed by my testimony, said she was sorry I had to go through what I went through with my mother, but that I had handled it with more grace and professionalism than most people could have managed. She said something else too, something I think about every time I walk into a courtroom now. She said that the law isn't perfect, that the system fails people all the time, but sometimes it works exactly the way it's supposed to. And when it does, when truth wins and justice happens, those are the moments that make all the broken parts worth enduring. I think she's right. I think that's why I keep doing this work, why I keep testifying, why I keep investigating cases that expose me to the darkest parts of human nature. Because every time a predator gets caught, every time a victim gets justice, every time the truth wins, it proves that the world isn't completely broken, that good people can fight back, that evil doesn't always win. My mother is in a minimum security facility in Riverside County. She'll be out in about 8 months if she behaves herself. I don't know what she'll do when she gets out, where she'll go, how she'll survive. And I don't care. That sounds harsh. I know it sounds cold and unforgiving, but I've learned that forgiveness isn't something you owe people just because they're family. That some bridges need to stay burned. That protecting yourself from people who hurt you isn't cruelty, it's survival. I received a friend request from her on social media 2 weeks ago. I don't know how she got access to a phone or computer. Maybe someone on the outside is helping her. Maybe the facility has different rules than I thought. It doesn't matter. I deleted the request without responding, blocked her on every platform I could think of, because I know what she wants. She wants back in, wants another chance to manipulate me, to convince me that she's changed, to set up her next con. And I'm not interested. I learned my lesson. I learned it the hard way, and I'm not going back. David asked me if I'll ever talk to her again, if there might be a time in the future when I'm ready to hear whatever she might have to say. I told him no. Told him that closure is a myth people tell themselves to justify giving toxic people more chances. Told him that I have all the closure I need. I have the court record. I have the judgment. I have the truth documented and verified and stamped with the seal of the Los Angeles County Superior Court. That's my closure. That's my ending. And it's enough. Next week, I start my new position, supervisory special agent. I'll have a team of 6 investigators. I'll be responsible for training them, for reviewing their cases, for teaching them how to build solid evidence and present it effectively. I think about what Eleanor would say if she could see me now. I think she'd be proud. I think she'd say something about how far I've come, about how I took all the pain and confusion and abandonment and turned it into something good, something that helps people. And I think she'd say that my mother did me a favor in a way, that by abandoning me, by forcing me to build a life without her, she gave me the space to become who I really am, not who she wanted me to be, not who she tried to make me, but who I chose to be. And that's a gift, even if it didn't feel like one at the time, even if it hurt in ways I'm still processing. I'm sitting in Eleanor's house right now as I think about all of this, sitting on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun come up over San Diego. The neighborhood is quiet this time of morning. Just birds and the distant sound of someone's sprinklers. The peace here is different from anywhere else. It's the kind of peace that comes from being loved without condition, from being seen and valued and believed in. And I realize that this is what I've been fighting for all along. Not the money, not the house, not even justice in the traditional sense. But this feeling of being worthy, of being enough, of being exactly who I'm supposed to be. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Marcus. He's sending me information about a new case. A woman in Pasadena whose son is trying to have her declared incompetent so he can take control of her finances. The parallels aren't lost on me. I text back and tell him to send me everything, that I'll review it today, that we'll build a case that shows the judge exactly what's happening, just like we did with my mother. Because that's what I do now. That's who I am. I'm the person who survived, who fought back, who stood in a courtroom and let the truth speak for itself. I'm the person who takes all the darkness I've experienced and uses it to help other people find light. And maybe that's not the life my mother imagined for me. Maybe it's not the daughter she thought she was raising, but it's the life I chose, the person I became, and I wouldn't change it for anything. The judge leaned forward in her chair that day, and when she asked Gerald Whitmore if he knew who I was, she wasn't just asking about my credentials or my job title. She was asking if he understood what he was dealing with, if he understood that the quiet woman at the respondent's table wasn't a victim, wasn't someone who could be easily dismissed or manipulated or broken. She was asking if he understood that I had spent 7 years learning how predators work, how they think, how they operate, and that I had used every single tool in my arsenal to document exactly what my mother had tried to do. And when he couldn't answer, when he sat there looking confused and unprepared and utterly lost, that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment Victoria realized she had made a fatal error, that the daughter she thought she knew, the daughter she had abandoned and erased and written off as weak, that daughter had become someone she couldn't recognize, someone she couldn't manipulate, someone who would stand up in a court of law and destroy her with nothing but truth and evidence, and the kind of strength that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. That's the real story here. Not that my mother tried to steal from me. People try to steal from other people all the time. Not that she lied in court. People lie in court every single day. The real story is that I didn't let her win, that I took everything she had done to me, everything she had tried to do, and I turned it into armor, into knowledge, into power. And when the moment came, when I had to choose between staying silent and fighting back, I chose to fight and I won. So if you're out there listening to this, if you're in a situation where someone who's supposed to love you is hurting you instead, if you're dealing with manipulation or gaslighting or financial exploitation, if you're scared and you don't know what to do, I want you to know something. You are stronger than you think you are. The truth is on your side even When it doesn't feel like it, and there are people out there, lawyers and investigators, and judges and advocates, who will help you if you ask, who will believe you if you speak up, who will fight for you if you're ready to fight for yourself. My mother thought I would be easy to break because I had been quiet for so long. She thought my silence meant weakness. She was wrong about that. Just like she was wrong about everything else, silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is just strategy. Sometimes it's gathering evidence. Sometimes it's waiting for exactly the right moment to show the world who you really are. And when that moment came for me, when I stood up in that courtroom and let my credentials speak, when I presented evidence that turned my mother's lies inside out, when I watched Judge Morrison see exactly what Victoria was in rule against her, that wasn't revenge. That was justice. Real justice, the kind that comes from patience and preparation, and refusing to let someone else's cruelty define who you become. Eleanor used to say that we choose our families twice, once when we're born and we have no say, and once when we grow up and we decide who deserves to stay. She said that blood doesn't obligate you to accept abuse. That family is supposed to be a safe place, and if it's not, if the people who share your DNA hurt you more than they help you, you have every right to walk away and build something better. I chose my family the second time. I chose Eleanor, who loved me unconditionally. I chose Marcus, who stood beside me when I needed an ally. I chose David, who sees me clearly and loves me anyway. I chose my colleagues at the FBI, who respect my work and trust my judgment. I chose Agent Rodriguez, who believed in me, even when my own mother was calling me incompetent. That's my family. Those are the people who matter. And my mother, Victoria Chen, the woman who gave birth to me and then spent the next 31 years trying to erase me, she's not family. She's just someone I used to know, someone who made a choice 13 years ago that severed whatever bond might have existed between us. I don't hate her. I did for a while. But hate takes energy, and she doesn't deserve any more of my energy than I've already given her. I feel nothing, indifference maybe, the kind you feel toward a stranger on the street. She exists, I acknowledge that, but she doesn't matter, not to me, not anymore. The wedding is in 3 weeks. We're keeping it small, just close friends and David's family. His parents are good people, the kind who actually show up when they say they will, who call on birthdays and remember details about your life. His mother asked me once if I wanted to invite my mother, if this might be an opportunity to reconcile. I told her no as gently as I could, told her that some relationships can't be fixed and shouldn't be, told her I was grateful for her concern, but I had made peace with my decision. She hugged me and said she understood, said I always had a place in their family if I wanted it, and I cried a little bit because that's what family is supposed to be. People who choose to love you, not people who feel obligated to tolerate you. I thought about wearing Eleanor's pearls for the wedding, the real ones, not the ones my mother stole and wore to court. But I decided against it. Eleanor's pearls belong in the jewelry box in her bedroom, in the house that still smells like lavender. They belong there with her wedding ring. And the brooch my grandfather gave her on their 50th anniversary, they're not meant to be worn. They're meant to be remembered, to be kept safe, to be passed down someday to someone who will understand what they represent. Instead, I'm wearing a simple pendant that David gave me for our first anniversary. It's a small silver compass. He said it's because I always know which direction to go even when the path isn't clear. I think that's overly generous, but I appreciate the sentiment. And it's true that I don't get lost much anymore. I used to, when I was younger, when my mother's voice was still in my head, telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worth keeping, but I found my way eventually, found north, found home, found myself. The book is almost finished. I've been working on the final chapters for the past month. The part about my mother, about the trial, about what I learned from the whole experience. It's been hard to write, harder than I expected, because putting it all down on paper means reliving it, means going back to that place of uncertainty and fear and anger. But it also means claiming it, means owning my story instead of letting it own me, and that's worth the difficulty. My editor says it could be published by next summer. Says there's real interest from the academic community, from law enforcement, from advocacy groups. Says it could help a lot of people. I hope so. I hope that someone reads about what happened to me and recognizes the warning signs in their own life. Recognizes that when someone who's supposed to love you is constantly making you doubt yourself, making you question your worth, making you feel like you owe them something, that's not love, that's manipulation. And you don't have to accept it just because they're family. Agent Rodriguez told me something interesting last week. She said she's noticed a change in me since the trial. Said I'm more confident, more decisive. Said I trust my judgment more and apologize less. I hadn't noticed it myself, but I think she's right. I think standing up to my mother, standing up in that courtroom and refusing to be diminished, it changed something fundamental in me. It proved that I could survive the worst confrontation I could imagine. And if I could survive that, I could survive anything. The cases I work on are different now too. I notice things I didn't notice before, patterns of manipulation, attempts to discredit victims, family members who use the legal system as a weapon. I see it all more clearly because I've lived it. And that makes me better at my job, makes me more effective at helping people who are going through what I went through. There was a case 3 months ago. A woman named Sarah whose husband was trying to have her declared incompetent so he could access her inheritance. The parallels to my own situation were striking. I worked with her attorney pro bono, helped them build a case, helped Sarah understand that she wasn't crazy, that her husband's gaslighting wasn't reality, that she had every right to fight back. We won. The petition was denied. The husband is now being investigated for fraud. And Sarah sent me a thank you card that said, I had saved her life. I don't know if that's true, but I know I helped, and that matters. David says I'm making a difference. Says the work I do ripples out in ways I'll never fully see. Says that every person I help goes on to help others. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's why Eleanor pushed me to document everything, to preserve the truth, because she knew it would matter someday, knew it would help someone, knew that my story, as painful as it was, could be a roadmap for someone else trying to find their way out of a similar situation. I think about my mother sometimes and wonder if she understands what she lost. If she realizes that in trying to take my inheritance, she lost any chance of ever having a relationship with me. If she comprehends that the money she was so desperate to steal wasn't worth the price she paid. I doubt it. People like Victoria don't think that way. They don't calculate emotional costs. They only see what they want, and they go after it regardless of who gets hurt. But that's her problem. Not mine. I spent too many years trying to understand her, trying to figure out why she didn't love me, what I had done wrong, how I could fix myself to be worthy of her affection. And the truth is there's no answer to those questions because the problem was never me. It was her. It was always her. And accepting that was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most freeing. I'm happy now, genuinely happy. I wake up in the morning and I don't dread the day ahead. I don't wonder what disaster is waiting. I don't question my worth or my sanity or my right to exist. I just live. I do my work and I'm good at it. I spend time with people who value me. I'm planning a wedding to a man who loves me without reservation. I'm writing a book that might help people. I have a life that makes sense, a life that feels like mine. And if you take nothing else from this story, take this. You deserve that too. You deserve a life that makes sense. People who value you, work that fulfills you, love that doesn't hurt. You deserve to be seen and heard and believed. And if the people who are supposed to give you those things can't or won't, you have every right to find them elsewhere. You have every right to choose yourself. That's what I did in that courtroom. I chose myself. I chose truth over family loyalty. I chose documentation over benefit of the doubt. I chose to fight back instead of accepting my mother's narrative about who I was supposed to be. And that choice, that moment of deciding that I mattered more than her feelings or her lies or her desperation, that was the moment everything changed. Judge Morrison's question still echoes in my mind sometimes. Do you know who this woman is? It was rhetorical, of course. She knew Gerald Whitmore had no idea. But it was also profound because my mother didn't know who I was either. She had decided who I was when I was 14, and she had never bothered to update that image. She thought I was still that scared kid asking why she didn't love me. She had no idea I had grown into someone who could stand across from her in a court of law and dismantle her lies with evidence and expertise, and the kind of calm certainty that comes from knowing you're right. So to answer Judge Morrison's question, yes, I know who I am. I'm Rebecca Chen, I'm 31 years old. I'm a supervisory special agent with the FBI. I'm an expert in criminal psychology and financial exploitation. I'm someone who survived abandonment and manipulation, and a mother who tried to destroy me for money. I'm someone who chose truth over comfort, justice over family, myself over the lies other people told about me. I'm someone who won, and that victory, that quiet courtroom triumph, that moment when the judge's gavel came down and the truth was officially, legally, permanently established, that was worth every lonely night, every moment of doubt, every tear I cried wondering if anyone would ever believe me. They believed me, the judge believed me, the evidence spoke for itself, and my mother, the woman who thought I was mentally incompetent, learned exactly how competent I really am. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me through Rebecca's entire journey. And maybe, just maybe, it helps someone who really needs to hear them. Drop a comment below. I want to know, have you ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you? Have you ever had to choose between family and truth? Your stories matter to me, and I read every single one. There's another incredible story waiting for you right now. Just click on your screen and keep watching. Thank you for trusting me with your time. It means everything.